Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Government officials discuss next steps to help the people of BC devastated by massive flooding following a recent storm. We hear from an AHS worker who's not happy about being put on unpaid leave for refusing to get the COVID-19 vaccine. And our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson discusses the push for an earlier leadership review of Alberta Premier Jason Kenney.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. BC has officially declared a state of emergency. The province's public safety minister, Mike Farnworth, said crews continue to sweep areas devastated by flooding and mudslides. Reopening roadways and ensuring evacuees are supported right now are also top priorities.
This has been an extreme weather event, and while the River Forecast Centre has issued 16 advisories since Saturday, and travelling warnings were continually issued by Dry BC, weather specialists have noticed that the impacts have been significantly greater than expected. Emergency Management BC is supporting local governments as we work together to get through this unprecedented rainfall. There are over 20 reception centres open around BC, and several states of local emergency and evacuation alerts and orders have been declared. While there were 3 landslide incidents cutting off traffic on our highways, all of those stranded motorists have now been rescued and taken to shelter and appropriate supports in nearby communities. Search and rescue teams and the RCMP have been sweeping impacted areas to make sure that no one has been left behind.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Ottawa will help the people of BC in the wake of the devastating mudslides in the province. Trudeau says he will discuss with BC Premier John Horgan the best way the federal government can assist.
Obviously, extremely concerned about the situation in British Columbia right now, and quite frankly, what hundreds of families are going through. Thousands of people affected across the province by these extreme weather events. As a government, we've been liaising closely with the government of British Columbia, providing supports in any way we can, and we will continue to be there. I'm supposed to be speaking with Premier Horgan a little later this evening to make sure that he knows what our ministers have been saying, which is we are there to help in any way, shape, or form we possibly can.
Wow, just incredible. Many in BC are dealing with flooding and power outages following the massive storm which hit the province. David Leese is the VP at Frontier Centre for Public Policy based in Abbotsford, British Columbia, and he joins me now via Zoom. Now, David, the flooding in your area of Abbotsford not only impacted people, but also a lot of livestock, including chickens and cattle, that were virtually wiped out. This will really hurt the supply chain.
You know, this is a devastating story, not only for this community, but really for BC as a whole, and I would argue for the country. In this immediate community, I mean, the devastation impact on people as you have literally, thousands of people across BC being evacuated to different areas, and then the impact on property as well as on animals. The devastation on the poultry industry and the dairy industry will be profound, as well as greenhouses and so many others. So this is a very, very sad day.
Now, many people may not realize that the Port of Vancouver is quite large, supplying a lot of our needs throughout the country. And due to the storm, it's now only working at a fraction of full capacity.
Yeah, this is a devastating impact on the supply, the logistical chain that Canadians count on every day. So the Port of Vancouver is our country's largest port facility. It's certainly the second or third in the continent. So when that port facility is not working well, because we have 2 of the major railway lines that have been knocked out, as well as the 2 superhighways, the Trans-Canada, as well as the Coquihalla Highway, among others, this is a perfect storm. So this is going to have a big impact on everyone's daily lives. And that's why you see hundreds of people lined up at grocery stores already out of concern that this is going to impact them.
That was David Leese, Vice President of the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, joining us from Abbotsford, BC. You know, the massive storm which hit the West Coast also was felt in Washington State. Floodwaters were being felt in many regions of the Pacific Northwest. Some communities were also evacuated.
So last night, we saw the water coming across here, and before we knew it, within a matter of minutes, truly a matter of minutes, it was over here. And so we moved the cars. It was so fast. You always hear how fast the floodwater is, but you don't realize it till you see it. It was really fast.
We have some friends along here, and we were walking down just to see what the flooding looked like. It's overwhelming. In fact, we were looking at a house right here where the cars are up, most of the way up, the water's most of the way up to the wheels. And so it's kind of disheartening.
Wow, praying for so many of those families. You know, as for the weather in our region, not much rain, but we did receive a little bit more snow. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a quick look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though the system which brought some of the white stuff has moved on.
That's right. We're not seeing any more snow in the forecast, Hal, at least not for now. It was a bit of a chilly one today, though, with the high of only 0 degrees. We should be jumping back into more seasonal averages for this time of year. Now, the seasonal high is 3.5. We should be reaching up to 5 degrees by tomorrow, so that should hopefully melt all the snow away. I'll have more details coming up later on in the show.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. You know, we've brought you stories in the past about AHS healthcare workers who've spoken out about not wanting to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Marilyn Markel is a clinical nurse educator for Alberta Health Services. She teaches long-term care based out of Red Deer. She graduated from the University of Alberta in 1986 with her Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Markel says she was told she'll be put on unpaid leave of absence by AHS because of her refusal to get the jab. She went on to say that she requested accommodation but was declined.
You know, I know many people who have received the vaccine and they had the right to choose to receive it. So why am I not being given the same right to not receive that vaccine? Based on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, I'm allowed to choose what goes into my body. I am allowed to earn a living. And apparently both of those things are being taken away from me, which I feel very strongly about. And I've always been proud to be a nurse, quite frankly. And now not feeling quite as proud, not feeling the pride to be part of an organization like AHS that's pulling this on the people that have supported over this last, 18, 19, 20 months. They've put themselves out there and now we're having that right to choose taken away from us.
Markel says she'll be forced to change careers because of her decision to not accept the vaccine. She adds that she'll continue to stand up for her convictions, regardless of the consequences. Premier Jason Kenney is facing an earlier call for leadership review. That's according to our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson, who says constituency associations have passed a resolution calling for it to be held in March instead of April of next year.
And they want to have it at sort of this special sort of meeting so that it's open to more of the party's grassroots as opposed to just those who are attending a convention, and also for some other practical reasons in terms of avoiding, for folks who are calving or seating, to make it easier for them to participate, things like that. So a number of reasons, some of them sort of openly political, some of them a little more practical behind this push to have an earlier leadership review.
Tyler Dawson will also discuss how Brian Jean is making a political comeback and what that'll mean for Premier Jason Kenney. I'll have details coming up after business news. The Alberta government announced that it will be providing $21.5 million to extend COVID-19 support to homeless and women's shelters across the province. Premier Kenney made the announcement Wednesday in Edmonton. Kenney says the funds are on top of the $71 million already committed to helping some of our most vulnerable.
And in addition to that, I'm pleased to announce that we'll be providing $1.5 million to activate up to 200 additional shelter beds at Commonwealth Stadium. We'll also support on-site overdose prevention and treatment services. Last year, we did some of this overflow space initially at the Expo Center and then in collaboration with the city at the TELUS Convention Center downtown. And I understand that work is being done to prepare Commonwealth Stadium as an overflow capacity area should it be needed. But of course, there are deeper and more complex issues related to homelessness and the social challenges that lead to it. And that's why I'm also pleased to announce today that we are creating a new provincial task force that will bring together the sector that serves the homeless, together with law enforcement agencies, and that's why Chief McPhee is here today, and other partner agencies and service providers, together with representatives of the business community.
Streets Alive mission here in Lethbridge is in need of men's jeans and joggers. The Christian nonprofit group said there is also a need for clean underwear, mittens, jackets, warm socks, and blankets. Director of Fund Development for the mission, Jennifer Lepko, says that once the temperatures plummet in our city, the need for warm clothing and a space to warm up surges.
When the weather changes, we get very busy. There's always an increase in demand. Coming in for a place to warm up. You know, when you're living on the streets, or even having to travel by foot from one location to another, have a place to come in and warm up, have a nice warm cup of coffee. Just that warmth is a huge need in the community, so we offer that as well.
Donations can be taken to the repurposed donation center located at 219 12B Street North most weekdays. You know, when it comes to reaching people for Christ, many people believe it's important to get involved in short-term missions work. Melissa Hyland wrote the book, Get Set, a Spiritual Preparation for Short-Term Missions. Hyland says when it comes to having an impact in a community, Christians should be really prepared and remember the power of prayer.
They told us that there was a little 3-year-old boy who was also at the clinic. He was unconscious, he was unresponsive, and they didn't have what they needed. They didn't even really know what was wrong with him. And so we asked if we could go in and pray for him as well. So we did. We went into his room and we laid hands on the little boy and we prayed for him, prayed for his mom. He was completely unresponsive while we were there. However, the next morning, we got a call from some people that worked there at the clinic. They actually came to the home where we were staying to share with us that he was fine, that God had healed this little boy.
Catch the full interview with Melissa Hyland and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. November 17th marked 2 years since a young Lethbridge man went missing. After searching for answers, the only thing his family has left now is hope. Marshall Iwasa's family is holding a virtual vigil and would like to see as many people as possible light a candle in Marshall's honor and to post a picture of it on their Find Marshall Facebook page. Jeanette Rocher has more.
Tammy Johnson lights these little tea light candles as a beacon of hope. They mark a 2-year anniversary of the beginning of a family nightmare.
Like everyone says, time heals all wounds. It doesn't feel that way.
It was exactly 2 years ago on the evening of November 16th that she last saw her 26-year-old son, Marshall Iwasa, before he disappeared into the night. She's the last known loved one to see him.
And I have comfort in the fact that I got to tell him I love him and that I got to kiss him goodbye. So that, for me, is a gift.
Leaving her west side home for a storage facility on Lethbridge's north side, he told his mom he'd be heading back to Calgary after that. His last known whereabouts was his storage unit on the morning of November 17, 2019. His security code showed he'd entered at 6 a.m., then left an hour and a half later. That's the last sign of Marshall anywhere. Then, a week later, his torched truck was located in the backcountry of Pemberton, British Columbia.
It's unbelievable. There's times I can't believe this is really happening to my family. And that's the hard part.
Iwasa has been listed with the National Center for Missing Persons. In a press release sent out today, Lethbridge Police Service says they continue to investigate the case and that a new search near the truck site is anticipated this spring. But there's been very few answers to his disappearance. Yet his mom lights these tea lights because in a case where there's been so little of it, they shine as a beacon of hope.
The only thing that I keep focusing on and staying hopeful is that we'll find answers and that we'll hopefully find Marshall.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Rocher.
Powerful story. Alert's organized crime team in Medicine Hat made a fairly substantial drug bust. Police seized 1.9 kilograms worth of meth from a home in the South Flats area. The estimated street value of all of the drugs combined was around $235,000. Officials say since 2018, Medicine Hat Police and RCMP have arrested more than 100 suspected drug dealers. Now, this particular bust included methamphetamine, fentanyl, cocaine, LSD, magic mushrooms, a rifle, and just over $100,000 in cash. 24-year-old Robert Pecoraro faces various charges, including drug possession and several firearms-related offenses. The Nikki-Yuko Japanese Garden is set to open for the season November 26th for the always popular Winter Light Festival. There will also be the grand opening of a new cultural center. Despite COVID restrictions in place, the festival boasted a large turnout, even higher than the previous year. As Micah Quinn explains now, festivities kicked off this week with a sneak peek of the over 100,000 beautiful lights.
The Minyo dancers from the Nikkei Cultural Society of Lethbridge were on hand to dance and take part in the announcement for the start of the Winter Light Festival and the opening of the new Nikki-Yuko Bunka Center.
So people will be able to come see this new space, check out the gift shop, and then check out our new cafe, as well as, of course, go into the garden and see the lights. We have more than 170,000 lights in the garden. Our gardeners have been working for few months now to just get everything ready, so it looks amazing and we're really excited to welcome people back again.
Tickets are now available for the Winter Light Festival with a new system for faster ticketing and food and drink options. 150 people will be allowed inside per hour during the festival.
We're doing limited capacities similar to last year, so that way we can maintain a safe capacity in the garden every hour. So you can purchase them in advance, you just go straight into the garden and enjoy.
You don't have to provide proof of vaccination for the festival due to it being outdoors, but masks will be needed. However, indoor private events will require proof of vaccination as part of the restriction exemption program. Last year, close to 20,000 people made their way to the festival, which is a 17.6% increase compared to the previous season.
We always hear every year from lots of guests that this is their yearly tradition, that they always make sure to attend with their families or their loved ones, and so we just hope to continue being that tradition for everyone.
If you want to purchase tickets to the Winter Light Festival, you can visit nikkayuko.com/tickets. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A day after she challenged her party's leader, Senator Denise Batters has been punted out of the Conservative Party caucus. In a release statement, Erin O'Toole had this to say: "I will not tolerate an individual discrediting or showing a lack of clear respect towards the efforts of the entire Conservative caucus who are holding the corrupt and disastrous Trudeau government to account." Batters was a Tory stalwart since she was first appointed to the Senate in 2013 by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. But on Monday, she launched a petition aimed at forcing a referendum on O'Toole's leadership within 6 months. Needless to say, that did not go over very well with party leader Erin O'Toole. Now, Senator Batters was not impressed about being expelled and responded with a tweet saying, "Erin O'Toole tried to silence me for giving our CPC members a voice. I will not be silenced by a leader so weak that he fired me via voicemail. More importantly, he cannot suppress the will of our Conservative Party." Batters also posted a video to social media to get members to sign the petition about a review of Erin O'Toole's leadership.
Under Erin O'Toole's leadership, the rift in our party is growing. He told us this is not your grandfather's Conservative Party and warned campaigning MPs they must agree 100% with his new direction, which constantly changes, or get out of caucus. As leader, Mr. O'Toole has watered down and even entirely reversed our policy positions without the input of party or caucus members. On carbon tax, on guns, on conscience rights. He flip-flopped on our policies within the same week, the same day, and even within the same sentence.
Wow. Well, we had some gusty winds today, but it appears as though the snow has moved on. Lots of sunshine on tap for the rest of the week. We'll have complete weather details for you in just a moment. You know, we received a little more snow here in southwestern Alberta, but still not bad considering this is the middle of November. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, we shouldn't be receiving much more snow this week, but those overnight lows are getting colder.
Yeah, those overnight lows are definitely getting much cooler. Now, keep in mind that is an average for this time of year, but it's been so long since we've felt them that we are really, really feeling them. We'll just put it that way. -7 is the overnight low this evening, speaking of which, and jumping up to 5 degrees tomorrow, which is higher than the seasonal average high. Seasonal average high is about 3.5. So we're there for most of this week, looking at 5 on Thursday, 4 on Friday. Saturday, 5 degrees, down to 1 degree on Sunday, and then look at Monday. All of a sudden, we're jumping up to 13 degrees. Must be a Chinook wind coming or something. 0 degrees is our high for next Tuesday. Now, as I mentioned, average for this time of year is 3.5, rounding up to 4 degrees. So we haven't been too bad. It was a little chillier today, though. Average overnight low -8. 18 was where we were at back in 1939, and right there in 1955, we were at -31. 7:47 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this evening at 4:46 p.m. It's actually more this afternoon is what I should be saying. So we're just 1 minute less than 9 hours of daylight by the way. It's happening really fast. Now the West Coast is still getting hit with some rain after all the destruction there. That's not what they need these days. Victoria and Vancouver both sitting at 7 degrees tomorrow. 1 degree in Edmonton with a mix of sun and cloud, only 15 wind there. 40 km/h wind in Calgary tomorrow with a high of 4 degrees and a mix of sun and cloud. Now Saskatoon looking at a high of -4. Going to be feeling like -25 though with the wind chill in the morning. After that blizzard that hit Regina, they're going to be experiencing some periods of snow that's going to be ending tomorrow. Same thing, Winnipeg, going to be having periods of snow that are ending earlier on in the morning. Toronto, rain. 7 degrees the high, 10 degrees the high in Ottawa, and Montreal high of 13 degrees. Now, keep in mind those that rain could be coming with freezing rain. So it's a little odd when you see those temperatures there. 13 in Fredericton, same thing, rain mixed with flurries. Showers in Halifax, high of 13, 8 degrees the high in Charlottetown. They also could be experiencing freezing rain, and 2 degrees the high in St. John's, Newfoundland with a mix of sun and clouds. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
A new low-cost airline will be starting up in Calgary. Lynx Air intends to begin flying sometime in 2022. The company's chief executive, Maren MacArthur, says Lynx will operate under the ultra-low-cost carrier model. That means passengers will be offered bare-bones discount fares and they'll be charged extra for additional services such as checked bags and cancellations.
You may notice that I have an Australian accent, but I'm proud to call Canada home, and I'm super excited about the opportunity to build a team here and an airline that will transform aviation in Canada forever. Lynx Air will be adopting the ultra-low-cost model, which has revolutionised air travel in Europe and the United States, lowering fares and opening the skies to all. The model is about simplicity, efficiency, and empowering customers to pay for what they want and nothing more. Airfares have traditionally been high here in Canada, and we at Lynx believe there are many Canadians who can't afford to travel or can't afford to travel as often as they would like. So Lynx's mission is to make air travel accessible to all by offering ultra-low fares, choice, and great customer service.
Canada's largest grocery and pharmacy chain says strong demand online and in stores boosted its third quarter profit by 26% over a year ago. Loblaw Companies says it earned $431 million, while revenue increased $16.05 billion from $15.67 billion from the same quarter last year. On an adjusted basis, Loblaw says it earned $1.59 per diluted share, which is up from $1.28 a year ago. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 64 points on the day to 21,653. The Dow was down 211 points to 35,931. The S&P 500 was down 12 points to 4689, and the Nasdaq was down 52 points to 15,922. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 240 to 78.36 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 36 cents to 4.82 US. Gold was up 5 cents to 1867.53 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 25.08 US an ounce. Wheat is at $12.30 per bushel, barley's at $9.75, canola's at $22.82, and corn is at $10.67 per bushel. Live cattle were up 50 cents to $132.23, feeder cattle were up 43 cents to $156.08, and lean hogs were down $1.55 to $76.18. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.28 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government announced it will be providing $21.5 million to extend COVID-19 support to homeless and women's shelters across the province. Premier Jason Kenney made the announcement Wednesday in Edmonton. Kenney says the funds are on top of the $71 million already committed to helping some of our most vulnerable. There's a real push to move up the review of Alberta Premier Jason Kenney's leadership. Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will have details for us in just a moment. The United Conservative Party convention is coming up this weekend. It'll be the first convention since the start of the pandemic. To discuss this in more detail and what we can look forward to seeing is our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Tyler, this one may actually be a performance review or to some extent a referendum on Premier Jason Kenney's performance?
I think that's one way that this convention can be looked at. So this is the first time that all the party members have, come together in one room to, do the schmoozing part of it. You can vote on policy proposals and things like that by Zoom, but you really can't sit down and talk about the future of the party and the prospects for the party in the same way. So it's going to be a fairly big deal. There's a lot happening sort of in the UCP backrooms, shall we say, and both publicly and privately. And there's going to be a number of things sort of happening this weekend that you can look at and perhaps take as a barometer of Jason Kenney's performance, whether that's elections for people on the party executive, whether that is reform to the sort of process by which a leadership review can be forced. There's going to be a couple sort of smoke signals going up, I think, that politics watchers are going to be looking at very closely this weekend in Calgary. And it's going to be an interesting one. There's no doubt about that. If for no other reason than everyone's going to be in the same room at the same time for the first time in quite a while.
I could just see the temperature of that room rising quite a bit here. Now, Tyler, Premier Kenney is facing an earlier call for leadership review. It was set for April of next year, but constituency associations have passed a resolution calling for it to be held March 1st. Why hold it early?
Yeah, well, there's a number of things going on here. So the first is sort of that a lot of the push behind this earlier review is from some of the people who are really unhappy with Jason Kenney and want his leadership review done early, partially to force him out. So this sort of goes back to several weeks ago when there was this big fight over leadership. The party ended up setting a review for early March. Early April. And then but the constituency associations, if 22 of 81 of them pass identical resolutions, they can, in theory, force a leadership review earlier. So that's what they've done. And they want it before March 1st. And they want to have it at sort of this special sort of meeting so that it's open to more of the party's grassroots as opposed to just those who are attending a convention, and also for some other practical reasons in terms of avoiding, for folks who are calving or seating, to make it easier for them to participate, things like that. So a number of reasons, some of them sort of openly political, some of them a little more practical behind this push to have an earlier leadership review. But the one thing I should say is I don't think we're going to see that this weekend, unless there's some crazy change in things that I'm completely unaware of. It won't be this weekend. It'll be at some point in the next 6 months or so.
But let me ask you something. At this point, who within the UCP would be strong enough to really lead the party outside of Kenney? Who would be even strong enough to defeat NDP's Rachel Notley? Would it be maybe Finance Minister Travis Taves?
Yeah, and there have been a few names bounced around, in conversations and things like that. And Travis Taves is obviously one of them. You have a bit of an issue sort of with some of the handling of the pandemic stuff and who has been associated with it. So, in theory, let's say Tyler Shandro was a possibility for a Kenney replacement. Well, he also was wearing some of the political damage from the handling of the pandemic, whether you're a critic on the left or the right. So that does make it sort of tricky for finding someone who could lead the party either in an interim capacity or in a long-term capacity. Someone like Rick McIver comes to mind, been around for a very long time, could be an interim leader, but whether or not someone like that would want to be the next leader is a completely different question, I think.
Now, a man who was once in the running to be the leader of the UCP, Brian Jean, is poised for a comeback. He's running in Fort McMurray to replace Lila Goodrich, who ran for the federal Tories. Now, is there a bit of an issue, however, because he may want to run for the UCP and has spoken openly about toppling Jason Kenney?
Absolutely. It's a rather difficult situation all around, let's say. And so he's running for the nomination to run for the UCP in that constituency. But of course, he's not actually the only person. There's another fellow, Joshua Gogo, who is running against Brian Jean in that. So they are sort of in this head-to-head fight for signatures and things like that to get the nomination to even contest this by-election. And there's been a little bit of controversy there. A post, for example, from Brian Jean referring to his opponent as a Nigerian economist that caused quite a bit of controversy. And And of course, there's this other side of it that you mentioned, which is his very outspoken criticism of Jason Kenney. And I can't imagine there's very much appetite in the sort of central party apparatus to have a critic of that caliber and firepower. Getting that nomination and then being yet another thorn in Jason Kenney's side.
Tyler, many Albertans are tired of hearing of the fourth wave of COVID-19, and now Alberta's top doc, Dr. Dean Henshaw, is warning of a possible fifth wave. When will this end? Are we going to be talking a year from now about the 25th wave?
It wouldn't surprise me one bit. Basically, what she's saying now is, we're sort of we could see what we had last year in the sense that it's getting colder out, social events are moving inside, less time outside, things like that. You could see a growth in cases. And part of the evidence for that, I suppose, is that the drop in cases has sort of plateaued. So they're still declining, but not quite as quickly as they had been, a week or two ago. So this is really at this point a warning saying, you still need to follow the rules. All the rules are still in place. The vaccine exemption or the restriction exemption program, occupancy requirements, things like that are still in place. And she's basically saying, this is a risk. Please continue to follow the rules so that we don't end up in a fifth wave.
We're running a poll question right now on Bridge City News website asking people if they're willing to get their QR code to visit some of those businesses taking part in the restrictions exemption program, and it's gone viral. It's gone crazy. Thousands of people have voted right now, and I think it's about 56% of people saying no, they do not want to get a QR code. So a lot of concerns that people have about these QR codes right now.
That's really interesting because, in Edmonton, for example, like such a large number of businesses have implemented that restriction exemption program. And I believe as of the 15th of November, if I'm not mistaken, the QR code is the only proof of vaccination you can use. And so it's just, I don't know where you'd go if you didn't go download it.
Lots of homemade dinners, right? Come on over, we'll have some chicken here, right? Tyler, the opposition NDP tried to start a debate at the legislature to discuss Premier Kenney's handling of the pandemic, but they haven't had much luck.
They have not. The short version of the story is the UCP sort of voted and moved that motion down to the very bottom of the order paper. So basically what that means is it may come up eventually, but it's sort of contingent on getting through all this other business first and might not happen before the legislature rises for sort of the Christmas break. Of course, the NDP furious about this, saying it's a sign of cowardice that they're running away from this debate and they don't want to, have their record questioned and things like that. The UCP, Jason Kenney, turning around and saying, well, look, they're trying to divide Albertans in the pandemic, and instead they should be focusing on the economy. So you can tell, I think, from that little brief summary that we very clearly are back in the legislature. We are very clearly back to the talking points and the question period sort of shenanigans that go on. That is very much the tone. So that's just worth noting on that front.
Let's circle back to the economy here. Now, ATB Financial is predicting that Alberta will be back to pre-pandemic levels of employment by June of next year. Now, it's not quite the boom times that we're used to, but still a solid economic recovery. The recent Amazon deal and a boost in oil prices is really helping Alberta to see the largest growth in the country next year. Do you think this will help the UCP?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it probably will. I mean, it's hard to imagine it not, right? Things are so dire for the UCP right now in so many ways that any economic boost is going to be a very good thing. There's a few things to note on some of the economic forecasts. The first is that Alberta contracted the most out of anywhere else in the country, with the exception, I think, of the Northwest Territories in terms of economic performance last year. So basically, there's a lot of room to grow. The other thing is that pre-pandemic levels is important, of course, because Alberta has not exactly been booming since 2014, 2016 in that sort of time area. But there clearly is a recovery on the horizon. The question a little bit is, when is that going to come? How big is that recovery going to be? And what is that actually going to look like in terms of, is this going to be an oil and gas driven sort of mini boom this time? Is it going to be something else? But that's a long way of me getting around to saying that this absolutely is going to benefit Jason Kenney. It's absolutely going to benefit the UCP. Obviously still at a risk. We just talked about the fifth wave. who knows? Something could go sideways. There could be a new variant. Not to fearmonger too much, but lots of factors, I think, going into the next sort of year and a half of Jason Kenney's premiership going into the election. But the economy, of course, was always one of the really, really big questions. So it's very notable to see these sort of predictions coming out from analysts.
You know, when you talk about the Alberta economy, obviously down here in southwestern Alberta, it's very much about agriculture. Calgary, right here, it's more about the energy sector, oil and gas. What I found interesting about Calgary is the new mayor, Jyoti Gondek, declaring a climate crisis, climate emergency. Is it that? What's going on? What's your take on that?
Well, you know, I think it's in large part has to do with younger voters. I mean, and I am just speculating on this, but you know, I think there is a generation of younger people, and not even that young necessarily, like sub 25, for whom climate change is sort of the issue for them as voters, as you know, political animals, let's say. And to some extent, I think Jyoti Gondek is, you know, reading the winds of change a little bit and looking at some of the voting demographics and the people who supported her and those sorts of questions and making these sorts of determinations. And you know, the other thing, the maybe more practical side of this is Calgary needs to fill those office towers. They need investment, and maybe the next big investment isn't going to come for an oil and gas company. It'll come from somewhere else. So, a couple possible explanations for it, but I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that it was a jarring thing to hear from the mayor of Calgary.
Yeah, maybe they're looking to diversify, you know, not put all your eggs into the energy basket right now. Because I look at all of the empty office towers right now, the high vacancy rate in downtown Calgary. Now let's talk about the $10 a day childcare deal that Alberta signed on to. The $3.8 billion plan will create about 40,000 daycare spaces and secure $10 a day daycare over the next 5 years. But sadly, Tyler, it's not condition-free like Quebec's.
That's right. So some of the conditions basically, well, it's more condition-free than some of the other deals. Let's maybe start there. The original call from the Liberals was for this to be basically not-for-profit daycare spaces, and there has been some wiggle room on that in this Alberta deal that it might cover some for-profit spaces. It doesn't cover sort of unlicensed spaces, whether that, you know, that's nannies or grandparents or something like that. So there's not sort of the full level of flexibility basically that the Alberta government had been asking for. But this was, I think, one of those things that Jason Kenney simply could not avoid, could not push back on too hard. You know, I think it's one of those things. Certainly in my life, you know, that the young moms that I know, this is the issue for them. Nothing is more important to them than $10 a day daycare. So I think for Jason Kenney on this front, probably any deal is a good deal. Whether or not he got everything he wanted, of course, the NDP is saying, well, look, this is the deal that we proposed months ago. This was our idea, and this is what we ended up with. So I do think you'll probably see a little bit of jostling, let's say, on that, and it could be a little bit of an election issue. And I would just throw that prediction out because, of course, this isn't going to happen overnight. As you said, this is sort of a 5-year plan. So if we look, you know, a year and a half down the road, and then we say, you know, how many of those 40,000 daycare spaces have been created? Well, all of a sudden, if it's not that many, that's an election issue for the UCP. All of a sudden, if it is a lot, that's great for the UCP, and they can campaign on that. So we're about at that point, I think, in the governance cycle when everything you can kind of look at and say, how is that going to affect them as we come into election season in a year and a half or so.
What's interesting as well is how Premier Kenney said this is just recycled Alberta money anyway, equalization payments money coming back to us here. Tyler, Alberta has been promised a public registry where you can search for if a teacher has been suspended. There are also some other reforms being discussed in terms of speeding the disciplinary process. Tell me more about that.
Right. So, you know, this is just another one of those pieces of legislation that the UCP is sort of chugging away on a little bit in the background. And it's basically going to be a searchable record of teachers going back to like 1957 or 1954, something like that. That's going to go up online, and you'll be able to search for whether their license has been suspended or canceled. And basically, the argument for it is that it's a sort of a transparency thing, an accountability thing. Parents can have more confidence. And also, trying to improve some of the reporting. So if there's a complaint about a teacher, they'll have to report it to Alberta Education in a slightly different and quicker way, I believe. And of course, interesting as well, because teachers are unionized, and the Alberta Teachers Association saying that, you know, not objecting to it, certainly, but saying that, you know, this is going to have to comply with privacy regulations and things like that. So it's an interesting thing, you know, in terms of people want to know that their children's teachers are fully licensed and all of that. But also just interesting in the sense that this is just an incremental bit of legislation, the sort of thing the UCP has been doing throughout the pandemic, just governing away while everyone fights about the other stuff.
Alberta's promising to fund litigation by two Métis groups that are seeking to fight the Liberals' tanker ban off the northwest BC coast. Now, Tyler, many Indigenous groups are fighting to get our resources to market.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a throwback, isn't it? I mean, I feel like we haven't talked about the tanker ban very much the last little while. But that, of course, was the ban on heavy tanker traffic that would basically be transporting crude oil. So this would have been sort of if the Northern Gateway pipeline had been finished, that would have been an issue. But there's this litigation fund that the Alberta government set up, I think as part of their fight back strategy, but if not directly part of the fight back strategy, then sort of directly adjacent to it, that essentially helps Indigenous groups fund lawsuits against the Alberta government, or I don't know, against the BC government. So in this case, it's against the federal government because it's federal legislation. And so we'll see where that ends up, see where that lawsuit goes. Of course, a little bit controversial because the Métis Nation of Alberta says that these are not actually, sort of representative groups of Métis people in Alberta. So a little bit of other drama in this announcement as well. But certainly that's a lawsuit that I'll be trying to keep my eye on because I think it's very interesting what could happen with that piece of legislation.
Yeah, you and me both, you bet. Our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, thanks for joining us today from Edmonton.
Always a pleasure, Hal.
Sharing the gospel is something most Christians believe they should do, but how many actually do that is perhaps another question. It can be intimidating. Some say one way to learn to do this is to go on short-term missions trips. Well, today's guest is going to discuss this with us. Melissa Hyland is the founder of Beautiful Feet International. It's a mission organization that has more than 50 pregnancy centers around the world. She's also the author of Get Set, a spiritual preparation for short-term missions. And she is joining us from Daytona, Florida. Welcome to Bridge City News, Melissa. So great to have you on today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So first of all, Melissa, maybe tell us a little bit about your book. What's it all about?
It is a devotional for short-term mission teams. It is written, it's a 31-day devotional, and it's designed to do one devotional a day for the month before you go to prepare yourself spiritually for the work that you're going to be doing on the field.
Okay, well, that makes sense, and it sounds like a handy tool for sure. So how long have you been doing mission work yourself?
I started doing international mission work in 1997, so that makes 24 years.
And I understand you at times do multiple trips a year.
Yes, I do have the privilege of doing that.
Yeah, and I think this year alone you've already been on 4, right? So that is very privileged.
Yes, it's been wonderful.
Yeah. Now, Melissa, there are quite a number of studies that indicate that a lot of Christians don't share their faith with others. So why do you think people are so reluctant?
I think that people don't share their faith because they're afraid to share their faith. And I think that that's very normal. In fact, even in the Bible, the Apostle Paul talks about sharing with fear and trembling, and which is a comfort to me because I think, I don't think of Paul as a fearful person. So if he was trembling, then I think it's okay that we are too. And so I really think that it's a lack of training. People are afraid. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. And so I really recommend that people take some kind of a class, a training on sharing your faith. It doesn't have to be some big, long college class. It can just be, a 1 or 2 hour seminar. But I think that when people get some training in it, that gives them confidence to do what it is that they want to do.
Right. And then your book also is about getting people prepared for I guess, sharing for faith and for missions trips, which essentially is what a missions trip is, right? So maybe can you share a few key things that a person would need to do to get properly prepared to do this?
When we're going to take go on a mission trip, the enemy doesn't like that, right? He wants to stop that. And so he's going to do all these things to try to discourage us. And he's not creative. He kind of comes in the same way all the time to discourage us. And so this is something that I wrote after years of experience with the kinds of things that I saw that were discouraging people and making it hard for them to go. So I kind of look at God's word and passages in God's word that just address these different kinds of things that maybe are troubling, to encourage and give us the strength to go and do the work that God's called us to do.
Sounds like a lot of wisdom in there. Now, Melissa, you believe that short-term mission trips are vital, right? So why do you say that?
I say that because, well, for one thing, because I've been doing it a long time. And so I actually, a number of years ago, did kind of my own research, if you can call it that, and sent letters to pastors and missionaries on the ground around the world to kind of ask them how they felt about short-term teams, and, whether they were valuable or, important or not. And I got resounding yes from them. Please come, because there are a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is because it can be very hard on the mission field. And when you have a team come, it's so encouraging. It gives you energy and is just something that, it gives you more strength to go on and do what it is that God's called you to do. Also, a lot of times teams can come in and do something that the people on the ground can't do just because of the numbers. If they're just one or two or three or four people, they can't always accomplish the things that a team that comes in with 10 or 15 or 20 people can do. So they're very specific jobs that can be done. And also, they are very valuable for the people themselves who go, because most people, almost all people that I know, will say that when they took their first short-term mission trip, that it was a life-changing event for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I did one myself years ago to Dominican Republic, and I would describe it that way as well. Now, Melissa, would you recommend those who are scared to share their faith go on a trip anyway?
I would, but I also would recommend that even before you go, that you get some training and that you practice here in the United States, because the point is that God wants us to share our faith wherever we are, right? Not just when we go to the Dominican Republic or wherever we go, but in our life, He wants us to do that. And so I really recommend that you are practicing it where you are, and then taking it with you wherever you go.
Yeah, whether that's the U.S., Canada, wherever you live, right in your own back alley, right?
That's right.
Okay, now you describe short-term missions trips as thrilling, stretching, and scary. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that whenever we do something that we're not used to doing, for me and for other people, it's kind of scary. We like to do what we know. And so it can definitely be stretching for all kinds of reasons, because a lot of times you're going somewhere where you don't speak the language. A lot of times you're going with a group of people that you don't know very well, and all of a sudden you're with them 24/7. Typically, when you're on a mission trip, you don't have a room to yourself. So, you're in a room with other people that you may not know very well. You're eating foods that you don't know. I mean, everything is new. And so that can be intimidating, scary, but it's also thrilling just to be able to be on mission from God, to just see God work. And, all of those things that make it difficult are also the things that kind of put a spotlight on the Lord and allow Him to really show His glory.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of which, have you ever seen any miracles happen on any of these trips?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen lots of miracles. I can share one from my most recent trip. I was in Togo, West Africa in September, and we have 14 pregnancy centers there. And while we were there, we got a call from one of the clinics where we have a pregnancy center, letting us know that one of our clients came in to deliver her babies. She was actually pregnant with twins. And so we went to the pregnancy center, to the clinic, and we were able to pray with the mom and pray for the children. And while we were there, they told us that there was a little 3-year-old boy who was also at the clinic. He was unconscious, he was unresponsive, and they didn't have what they needed. They didn't even really know what was wrong with him. And so we asked if we could go in and pray for him as well. So we did. We went into his room and we laid hands on the little boy and we prayed for him, prayed for his mom. He was completely unresponsive while we were there. However, the next morning, we got a call from some people that worked there at the clinic. They actually came to the home where we were staying to share with us that he was fine, that God had healed this little boy. And they even brought a picture of him. And he was just standing up and laughing and looking so joyful, like any other little boy, a completely different person than the one we had seen the night before.
That's interesting. What had been wrong with him? That's kind of scary.
They did not know. That was the thing. They didn't know what was wrong with him. And I don't know what was wrong with him, but I know that the Lord healed him.
Oh, that's amazing. So, Melissa, what do you say to those who say that they either can't afford a trip or that they can't get time off of work or any other reasons like that? I mean, that's very common. So sometimes people think a place might be too dangerous as well. So what do you say to that?
So it depends on the situation, but if you really, I would say to someone, if you're in that situation and you really want to go and you really feel that God is calling you to go, then I would say that you need to pray, because I have seen many times God open doors for people that they didn't think would be opened. And in terms of finances, very rarely does anyone come and say, oh, I want to go on the trip and here, I can write you a check. You know, typically people do not have the money, but sometimes those things are true and you really can't go. Sometimes there are circumstances where you can't go, but you can still be a part of that because you can still pray and you can still give. And so the people who are stay behind and are praying, the people who are giving and praying for others to go, are absolutely a vital part of the mission, as vital as the people who actually get their feet on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, we're talking about all the positive things about this, but you also say that sometimes on these short-term trips, team members can sometimes compete with one another, and that's a little discouraging. So what does that typically look like?
I have not seen a whole lot of it, but sometimes I think that people can be discouraged because, they have taken vacation, they've spent all their money, and they get over there and maybe they're not getting to shine in the way that they thought they would be able to, because they don't speak the language, or maybe because they're not particularly skilled in the thing that's needed right that minute. But again, I think it all goes back to the concept of the body of Christ, right? And God chooses the team. And I believe that every time someone goes, that you are so important. God chose you to be a part of that team. So maybe you're not the one standing up and speaking, or maybe you're not the one standing up and singing, but you are there. You are praying. You are a part of the team, and every part of the team is equally important, just the way the Bible talks about the body of Christ, right? And just in general, we're not all designed to do the exact same thing. And sometimes some parts of the body maybe look more glamorous than others. But in terms of the function of the whole and God's design, every piece is equally important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would think that he would equip you for what he wants you to do, right? So, I mean, what advice do you have for viewers who are considering this?
Well, I would encourage you to go. If there's any way you can go, again, like we were saying before, it really is a life-changing experience. So if you can go, I encourage you to go. I encourage you to pray. Be praying for opportunities, and God will show you. You will be surprised at the opportunities that God brings to you once you start praying. And so just commit yourself to praying, and maybe even ask some other people to pray with you for God to show you what it is that He has for you.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of feedback do you generally get from those who go on these short-term missions trips? I know we were saying before that most people say it's life-changing in one way or another, but what other kinds of feedback do you get?
just they love it, because typically when you're on a mission trip, you're just completely focused on God and what he's doing. And so you're going to see over and over again God showing up in ways that you don't notice sometimes in your regular life, because in our regular life, a lot of times we're doing the things that we know how to do, and we're kind of not relying on God as much, right? We're relying on our own strength. Well, I know how to do this. This is my job. This is what I do. But all of a sudden, when you get into a place where you don't know what you're doing, you really are focused on God, kind of like Peter walking on the water, right? When he was in the boat, well, he kind of knew what he was doing. But once he got out of that boat, he really had to keep his eyes on Jesus, and then he could walk on water. And so, I think that, and also another part of it too, is it opens people's eyes to how other people in the world are living. You know, when you go somewhere and you see people living, you know, without electricity, you see people living without access to clean water. I mean, you see really the world as most people live it. I think then you come to be more grateful for what you have, and more compassionate, with more of a desire to help others, because you realize how great the need really is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Melissa. I know one thing that was very impactful for me was seeing how these people live, but they're not feeling sorry for themselves at all. In fact, they were offering us gifts just for being there and coming to their homes, and some of them were literally living in garbage dumps and stuff. So a humbling experience, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being with us, Melissa. We really appreciate having you on today. Melissa Hyland is the author of Get Set, a spiritual preparation for short-term missions. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.